Okay, so welcome to our, I think this is our 9th or 10th session now via Zoom over the 2020 and the lockdown. So welcome everybody, thank you for joining. Hopefully this tonight will be a useful session for you. We've got lots of people, some more folks joining there. Lots of folks join. We've got 20 people on now, which is great. We are recording tonight's session, so if you don't want to appear on the video, which will go onto YouTube later, then please perhaps don't put your camera on. A few Sutton and Cheam things. I can see we've got a good mixture of people that are members of the club and guests, and that's fantastic. I hear the net is still fairly active on Monday nights on our GB3 XP repeater, so Monday nights 8 o'clock. If you don't join that, then please feel free to do that and have a chat with the guys in the club. Hope everyone's safe and well. We've kind of finished our second lockdown, and hopefully with this new vaccine coming out soon, things will start to return to normal fairly soon. Okay, we've got a fantastic speaker for you tonight. We've got John Rogers, M0XOF, and John has spent many years, both in his professional career and his amateur radio career, both studying for and taking exams, and he's got some amazing tips for you tonight on tips and tricks on how to pass. So I'm sure you'll have lots of questions. So what we'll do, if it's okay, if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat window, or just let me know in the chat window, and at the end we'll bring you in and you can ask John whatever you like. So John, I'm going to hand it over to you, and off you go. So let me just sort the video out. Where have you gone? There you are. There you go, John, over to you.
Very grateful to have something of an audience. Chris doesn't actually know this. I'm going to start this off. Don't worry, Chris. Tonight is something of a special occasion for me, because last year, on the 10th of December 2019, absolutely to this second in time, believe it or not, by sheer coincidence, I was sitting in the middle of my advanced full exam for the RSGB. So it's exactly a year since I sat my full RSGB license exam for radio science. Now, the reason for saying that is partly because it's hopefully an interesting starting point, but it's due to that I decided to put this presentation together. Having spent a few years in the Sutton and Cheam Radio Society, I wanted to give something back to them for all the help and support they'd given me in doing the exams. And I thought one thing that I could do would be to put a presentation together with some of the experience and knowledge that I've gained as an examiner over a number of years. So that's where this has come from. The other point of this is that it was originally intended to be given back in February. I put it together in January, and Chris had agreed that I would do this presentation as a face-to-face presentation in February of this year. About 3 days before I was due to do the presentation, we had lockdown. I'd kind of forgotten about the presentation subsequently until about a month or so ago. Chris came to me and said, well, could you still do that presentation, John? And I thought, well, probably. But of course, a lot has changed in this last year. I think we'll all agree it's been a very unusual year. And that's meant that I had to reevaluate what I'd put into this presentation and how I was going to promote it. But keep in mind that it was supposed to be a face-to-face presentation. I've tried to get around some of the potential problems that not doing a face-to-face presentation, standing in front of you, could produce. This presentation is actually designed and aimed at those of you that want to do your intermediate and advanced exams. It would apply equally to those of you wanting to do a foundation exam, in fairness, the information I've got in here, but it's designed specifically for the intermediate and the advanced people amongst your group here who want to take this exam. Now, this is a bit of a disclaimer. This is in no way intended to be a mini course for the intermediate and advanced exam. Clearly, that's impossible to be doing in the kind of time that we've got here this evening. But what I can do for you is to help you to prepare for the exam in the best possible way. In terms of what you can learn from such things as past papers and from mock papers, But past papers, of course, are not something you can get for the RSGB, and from the syllabus. So what I can do is to help you prepare in the best possible way for the exams, to give you the increased chance of passing your exams. Now, you might say, what are my credentials for sitting here talking to you about all this stuff this evening? That's quite a reasonable question. Well, to start with, as you may have gathered, over a period of some 3 years, I managed to pass first time all the 3 exams for the RSGB license. So the foundation, intermediate and advanced exam, with the final one being a year ago exactly. So that gives me some, hopefully, credibility of having done the exams quite recently, so I know what's expected of us as candidates. The other more important point might be that over my some 40 odd years of a career, a big part of that was done working as a trainer, and probably of even greater importance or interest might be as an examiner. I worked as an examiner for about 25 years odd, as opposed to my day job almost, but it was linked to. And I examined in various universities in this country twice a year, every 6 months or so, around about June, July time and Christmas time, unfortunately, or January time, I have to be in fairness and say. Okay, so that's my background to being able to do this. Now, you don't have to be a genius to be able to pass these exams. I genuinely, honestly believe that. I honestly believe also that the RSGB want us to pass these exams. Because if you look at the information they give us, you will realise, hopefully from what I'm talking to you about here this evening, that there's a lot of very useful, very helpful information out there, if only you are, one, aware of it and are prepared to work your way through it. Now, it's really important that you don't have any surprises when you turn up to an exam. It's important to get a good working understanding of what's going to be expected of you when you turn up to sit the actual exam itself. And you need to know what kind of format to expect and a kind of a general overview of the type of content you can expect from the exams. Now, if you have a good working knowledge of this, it means that you'll have greater confidence when you turn up to the exam. You're bound to be nervous. I certainly was last year. I've done loads of exams over the years. I'm still nervous. That's not a bad thing necessarily. Keeps you sharp. It helps your confidence. If you're more confident, you're certainly likely to be less nervous. And if you're less nervous, you're likely to be able to focus more fully on the questions and the paper in front of you. And at the end of the day, depending on how you do, you can at least be reassured that you've done the very best you can possibly do to actually pass the exams. So this is getting to the real nitty-gritty of what I want to be talking to you about here this evening. Analysis of exams. This is the first section. Exams are not just randomly thrown together, although some people might think they are. They have a plan and a structure. And you can get a feel for the plan and the structure of exams by various documents that examining boards put out. I've already said you can look at mock papers or past papers if you can get hold of them, and the syllabus. Quite often over the years when people have realised that I'm an examiner, especially an examiner of exams that they are about to take, people have asked me kind of, what is the percentage pass mark? And I often thought, well, that seems like a very obvious question to be asking, but how much value is that to us if you're actually going to sit the exam? A more important question would be, how many questions are there? And more importantly, how many questions do I need to pass or answer correctly to pass the exam? Another point you might want to know is, how long is the exam? And from the foregoing, of course, you can work out how much time you have per question, which is really an integral part of what I actually want to be talking about here this evening, and how you approach exams to give you the best possible chance of passing. Our exams, they're radio exams, they're science, physics based. You can imagine that obviously there's some mathematics in there and there's some pure theory in there. So another question might be, how much maths do we have in the exams? How much theory do we get in the exams? that kind of gives you a broad overview as to what I want to be talking to you about here this evening. Perhaps I should get out more, but I've analysed the RSGB exam mock papers and the documentation that they produce, the syllabus, and I want to cover all of those in some bit of a detail here this evening to kind of demonstrate to you what information you can obtain, which can definitely help you to make it easier in the exams. So, format, content, I mentioned that in the beginning here now, in the introduction. I think it's probably fair to say that most of you, if not all of you, know that the RSGB exams are multiple choice. You have a question and 4 potential answers. Historically, the exams were done on a paper format with an optical mark sheet. And for a number of years now, as I'm sure you're also all aware, the RSGB are working towards an online examination. And none too soon have they actually managed to do that. If you decide and do the exam in the not too distant future, you will be doing it online. And what that means is when you apply to the RSGB to do the exams, TestReach, who control the online exams for them, will give you an app, software to download onto your laptop. And once you download that, you will then get a tutorial which runs you through the TestReach to explain to you how the exam format works and what you can expect in the exam. Now, the principle is that, of course, you can work your way steadily through the question paper. If you hit a question you're not really sure about, the system allows you to put a flag on it, and I'm going to come back to that point a number of times as I go through this evening, so you can attach a flag to it. Then you work your way through the paper. Once you come to the end, you press the button which allows you to put the exam through to the examiners. That will actually block you from submitting the exam if you haven't answered all the questions. So that will make you think, oh, hang on, I've got to go back, look at any questions you haven't done, try and do those questions. What this is telling us is that you have to answer all the questions, something I very strongly believe in anyway. Even if you have no idea, no inkling of the answer to a particular question, they're multiple choice, you can just guess an answer. I'm not advocating that, I've got something to say on that a little bit later. But just guess the answer. You've got a 25% chance of being right. That said, once you've put the paper in and you've answered all the questions, you will immediately be told what your provisional marks are and whether you've passed or failed. Officially, you'll get a letter from the RSGB a few days later to tell you, yes, well done, congratulations, you passed. But the optical online examination will give you the results straight away. Foolishly, when I did the exams last December, I was the only one in a group of 7 people, 8 actually, including myself, that did the optical mark sheet. The result is, of course, doing the advanced exam, that has to go into the RSGB, and they will mark it for you and then send you the results. So when I came out of the exam at this time last year, I had no idea whether I passed or failed, so I had to wait for 2 weeks to get the result. Anyway, enough said on that. Not the cleverest things to have done. Now, I think probably many of you are already aware of this. Due to coronavirus this year, the RSGB had to look very seriously at how they pursued the exams in future, and certainly during this year. And in July, they decided that all the exams would be done automatically online. That's fine, but you can do them from home, which is wonderful. What more, for those of you that would be potentially doing the foundation and the intermediate, of course, you have previously had to do practical assessments. Well, those practical assessments, I suspect many of you already know also, have been suspended until further notice. They will be reviewing this, so they may well come back once we're all inoculated and the problem of COVID-19 is just a bad memory. So they may well bring the practical aspects of the exams back at that stage. The point is, there's never been a better time for you to do the exams. You don't have to do the practicals. You can do the exams online from the comfort of your own home. What could be nicer than that? This also, of course, just in case you're missing the point, does also apply to the full exam, as it's now called. So the same thing applies. What happens is with all of these exams is you have, you're allocated an online remote invigilator. And the remote invigilator is literally invigilator as if you went to a venue to do your exam. But you do need to have a webcam so that the invigilator can watch your every move, simply to make sure you're not cheating. So you are being watched. Big Brother's there watching you whilst you're doing your exam. So as far as the application and such like is concerned, the application form, if you just put in a Google search, RSGB exam bookings, it'll almost take you immediately to this page. This is the header of the exam booking page. Nice and simple. It just gives you some general information there about needing a webcam and the limitations of how the exam and everything works. Below this page, I only put this top header in there. Directly below what's written in front of you there's a box which is a calendar, and there you can actually book your exam. Now, when I looked at the exam booking sheet, what was it, yesterday? Yeah, yesterday was the last time I looked at it. They are taking exam bookings for all of the exams in middle of January. So if any of you are ready to go, and you take my advice in terms of saying, well, you know, it's the best time to possibly be taking the exams, you could do it in the middle of January. The calendar shows which day, and the date, of course, and which day of the week, because you can do it any day of the week. And there are 6 time slots during the day. It's, let me get this right now, this is out the top of my head from memory. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning. Why do you want to do the 8 o'clock exam in the morning? I don't know, but it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I think it's 9:30, then it's an 11 o'clock, an 11:30, a 5 o'clock and a 6:30. So it gives you a very good span of times which you could actually sit the exam. Directly below that is a box where you can check your own details, your home address, telephone number, and a crucial point, of course, is your email address, because all of these online exams are controlled totally by an accurate email address. Below that, there's a payment section, so you can tick the particular exam that you want to do, or radio button the particular exam you want to do, and it has the cost right next to it. And obviously below that, there's a place where you can fill up your credit card details and lose your money. So the credit card details, and then you just simply press book now. And very shortly you will get a message from the RSGB to say that yes, it's been accepted, the dates and the times that you put in, and they will hand you over to TestReach, who will then give you the software to download, or the app to download onto your laptop and to do the tutorial. So that's an overview for you as to the format and how you go about applying for the exams at this moment in time. It's very straightforward, very simple, as I said. But let's get really into the nitty-gritty as to what it is I want to be talking to you about here tonight. Analysis of exams. Now, I said you can glean a huge amount of information by digging through mock papers and syllabus. So let's have a look what I've actually discovered and what I can come up with. You could try this yourselves if you like, but I've hopefully done all the work for you. That's what the intention of this evening meeting is all about. So let's first of all have a look here. Now, for the intermediate exam, you have 46 questions that you have to do in an hour and a half, 90 minutes. For the advanced exam or full exam, there are 58 questions, and you have 2 hours in which time to do that. Now, straight away, those maths that you've got about 2 minutes per question, whether it's the intermediate or the advanced exams, approximately 2 minutes per question. You get a little bit longer for the foundation, about 2.3 minutes actually, quite wide, I don't know, but there we are. You get about 2 minutes. Some of you might think, oh, that's loads of time. Others might think, oh my goodness, that's not very much time at all. A little bit later on, I wanted to explain to you how you can actually gain some time in the exams by the way in which you approach it, using correct exam techniques. We'll come back to that later. Now, the other point that people often ask is, what's the pass mark? Well, for both of these exams, it's around about 60%. So you have to get 60% of the answers correct to pass the exam. Now, from that, you can work something else out. You can slightly do this backwards, because if you know the number of questions you've got in the exam for intermediate, 46, 60%, that means you've got to get 28 questions correct, obviously. Now, this might seem a strange thing to do, guys, but it also tells us that if you know there are 46 questions and you've got 28 questions you have to get right to pass 60%, you can get 18 questions incorrect. Now, if you stop and think about that, 18 questions, that's quite a number of questions that I can fail on and still pass the exam. Or not even do. I'm not recommending you do that, but I'm trying to reassure you here that it's not that complicated a business. If you look at the advanced exam, you get a similar kind of situation. There are 35 questions that you have to pass, and of those, there are 23 questions which you could get wrong and still pass. Now, I am going somewhere with this, so bear with me, just bear with me. Okay, so you can have further analysis of the exams. I said at the beginning of my introduction that you'd really want to know for a physics type based exam, how many theory questions have you got and how many maths questions have you got? Whenever I've talked to people in the radio club about the exam, the first thing they seem to bring up is maths. And they, oh my goodness, it does my head in, I've got all this to do in the mathematics and everything. Well, let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at this in real terms, guys, in the cold light of day. For the intermediate paper, you've got 46 questions. If you are sad enough, like me, to count up the number of questions and look at them carefully and determine, are these genuine maths questions, or are they maths questions at all, or pure theory? On average, you'll get something around about 37 theoretical questions coming out of the mock papers. And the mock papers are pretty much a copy of what you're going to get in your actual exams. Same thing applies to the full exam, 58 questions. There are some 48 questions which are theoretical. Now, I'll put this slide in here because, again, talking, as I said, to a number of people in the radio club, they seem to be most worried about the kind of maths, the amount of maths in the radio RSGB radio exams, the licensing exams. And there are a number of issues that have come up, one not least the amount of maths, necessarily how complicated it is, and using formulae. I'm going to come back to that as well a little bit later on, hopefully give you some aid with that. But if you take on board what I've said already, that we've calculated that you have 2 minutes per question, theory questions can take you actually a far less time than 2 minutes. There are a number of questions that you'll come across. I mean, this happens with me, and I'm sure it's happened to other people who've done the exams already, that as you're reading the question, you already know the answer in your head. All you need to do is to go down the list and say, well, that's the answer. Be careful, of course. I'm talking to you as an examiner now. Be careful. Do read the question carefully. It's very, very easy. And people have done this so many times over the years to make a mistake in misreading what's being asked of you. So read the question carefully. You know the answer, you answer it. You've got time saved there. It could take you 30, 45 seconds to answer a 2 minute question. In fact, I wasn't going to say at this point, I will say this here. In my exam last year, I'd been beavering away and I thought, oh, wonder how long I've been going for. And I looked up at the clock, which was directly in front of me there, and it was 8 o'clock. I'd been running for an hour. And I'd done 48 questions, maybe not all of them. I actually passed some of the questions because I said, right, I'm not sure about that. I shall come back to it later. But 48 questions nonetheless. Now, there's only 58 questions in the whole exam. I had 10 questions to do in an hour. Now, needless to say, it didn't take me an hour to do the last 10 questions and then go back over the paper, have a look at the questions that I hadn't answered when I first went through the paper, and give some idea as to what maybe the answer might be, even to the point of possibly potentially just guessing one. But that you can do in a rather clever way as well, which I'm going to demonstrate later on to you. Maths questions, however, will generally take you longer. So what I'm getting at here is that if you're not confident with the maths and you feel a little bit uncomfortable with it, have a quick look at the question. If you feel you're happy with it, fine, obviously do it. But if you think, oh, I'm really not sure about that, leave it. Move on to the next question. I'm recommending here that you do not sequentially move through a theory paper. That's never been the advice for anybody. Even the test reach flag this, probably no pun intended there, but they flag it up to you, because if you can't do a question, I've already said, they allow you to position a flag against that question so you can go back and do it later. Now that must tell you something. And what I'm saying here, to make it as clear as possible, you go, do question 1, you can do it, question 2, question 3, question 4, question 5, I'm not really sure about. Don't waste any more time on that. Move on. Question 6, I can do that, fine. Question 7. Keep in mind that each question you do with confidence, you're probably going to get the marks. And you only have to get the 60%. As you gradually move forward, you may be missing questions, but you're moving forward and answering questions that you feel confident with. You are picking up marks all the way through. You come to the end of the exam, you may, even having not done some of the questions, you may have already passed. So that is worth keeping in mind. Work your way through them. Keep in mind that some of the questions you'll be able to do easily. Some will be a bit more difficult. If you're not sure about them, don't do them, leave them. Maths questions, they're going to take you more time. Now, let's analyse the exam a little bit more. Let's have a look at the maths questions here. In the intermediate exam, you could have probably calculated this before. I said to you that you can get 18 questions incorrect in the intermediate exam and still pass. If you calculate or count up the number of maths questions that appear in the mock papers, there's about 9 or 10 questions which are true mathematical questions. If you do the same thing for the advanced exam, I said earlier you have about 23 questions you can get wrong. But look what I've just put on the screen. You've got 11 maths questions, 11 questions. It varies a little bit from mock paper to mock paper, but it's around about 10 truly maths questions you've got. So for those of you who are out there worrying, it's a maths exam, I've got a huge amount of maths to do. Not really. It's a maths-based subject, yes, but majority of the questions you're being asked are theoretical. And this is why I'm saying to you that I genuinely believe the RSGB want us to pass. They're not putting any blocks in our ways. They're really not. Now, you might have realized that what I'm actually saying here is that theoretically, you could pass these licensing exams without actually doing any of the maths questions at all. Again, I'm not advocating that. I'm sure by the time you come to do the exams, you can probably do quite a number of the maths questions and pretty well all of the maths, all of the paper, including the theory questions. But if it worries you, that is a potential possibility. If you didn't do any of the maths questions, you could still get a pass, because you'd have to do all the theory questions correctly, well, nearly, but you could still pass. So there's no real blocks in your way for going ahead and sitting the exam if you've done the right amount of work that you need to from the syllabus to be able to sit these exams. Okay, we've talked about now the format of the exams and the kind of numbers of questions and what we can glean from what the syllabus and the mock papers can tell us. Let's see what else we can come up with here. Now, the RSGB, quite rightly, recommend very strongly that you should do some kind of a course before you consider sitting the exams. I have to say that I actually didn't. Well, that's not strictly true. I did the foundation course with Sutton and Cheam Radio Society, and that was great fun. I did 2 Saturdays for the training. However, I had already purchased the foundation manual in August of the year that I was doing, 2016, and I studied it for 3 months. No background in electronics or electrics and radio science at all. So I was, in my own mind, I was pretty much close to assuming that I could probably sit the foundation exam. I did the 2 weeks training with Sutton and Cheam, which was great, absolutely great. It filled in a few corners for me, and we did the exam on the Sunday afternoon after a little competition quiz in the morning about the exam, which was first class. What I'm saying is that it is perfectly feasible to do the exams without having formal training. Although if, I nearly had a power cut here for some reason. Don't please have a power cut. We don't need that in the middle of my presentation. These manuals you're more likely familiar with. intermediate license manual and full license manual. I got most of my information for the exams from these manuals. Yes, I bolstered it by reading various books. I bolstered my knowledge by information from the internet, which of course you have to be a little bit careful about. But one really amazing thing that I came across was that I was a member of the Sutton and Cheam Radio Club, Radio Society, and there's a huge wealth of experience and knowledge in the radio club. And what I was absolutely bowled over by was how readily the members of the club were prepared to share that knowledge with me. So what I'm saying here is that if you've got colleagues and friends who have already done the exams and you feel that they're relatively experienced, then do talk to these people. They'll be very willing to try and help you with whatever you've got to do in terms of the exams. I'm very grateful to people like Chris here and John Milton, who's on the presentation here this evening, I know he is, and Martin Butler, who's not with us here this evening, and a number of other, many people, I can't even think of the names to actually mention them here this evening, who helped me to actually train for the exams, even right up until the last minute when I wasn't sure about certain aspects of a particular question. So use what resources you have available to you out there by talking to people. They'll be more than happy to help you, I'm sure of that. These manuals, really, I suppose I'm walking proof of that. You can pretty much learn everything you need for the exams from these manuals. You'll need some help and explanation somewhere with certain aspects of it, I'm sure, because I certainly did. But be careful, because there are a number of typos in these manuals, and that can sometimes throw you. There was certainly one in the intermediate, it was the intermediate course that I actually had, which it puzzled me for several months until the RSGB wrote an adaptation or an adjustment to that question, and I saw it on their site, which was then proved that, in fact, I wasn't going around the bend. There was a problem with that particular question. So be a bit cautious about that. There are other resources out there, which we'll come back to in just a second. Now, as I said, you can get all the information you require to do the exams from those manuals. Now, in each of those manuals, I know how closely you guys have contemplating doing these exams have looked at the manuals, but in each of them, the foundation, intermediate and advanced, they have these lists. Now, this is the one for the advanced exam, because that's the most elaborate one. But I thought I'd just throw this in to kind of point out something. If you haven't already tumbled to this one, this is a list of the topics that you're going to get in the exams. And it tells you the weighting towards each of these topic headings. For example, you will, in the advanced exam, get 7 questions on licensing. You'll get 11 questions on technical aspects. Now, when you're studying and revising for your exams, like me, you might say, oh, you know, I like propagation. I'm going to spend a lot of time learning propagation because it's a subject you happen to like. But if you go down here, propagation, there's only 3 questions on propagation in the exam. So why would you want to spend a lot of time studying and learning about propagation? Wait until you pass the exam and just do that in your spare time. From the exam point of view, you're only going to get 3 questions. Now, coming further down here, you can see safety. The RSGB like safety. That's absolutely correct, as it should be. You know, we deal with some very high-powered bits of equipment, high voltage, high currents on occasions, and some quite dangerous techniques, like climbing up ladders to put up antennas and what have you. It's quite right that the RSGB are concerned about safety. Now, they have 4 questions, in fact 4 in the intermediate exam and 4 in the advanced exam, and there are 2 in the foundation exam. So they are quite keen on safety. But a little pointer for you here, you might get a question that you think, oh, you know, I don't really know what they're actually wanting from me as the answer in this question. Think safety, because some of them, they might not be one of these standard 4 safety questions. It could be another one of these questions, one of the other headings, where they're leaning towards a safety aspect. And sometimes when you think that way, you think, oh, hang on, it's probably answer B or whatever. So there's a little help in there. Do keep safety in mind when you're doing the questions, because the RSGB are very, very keen on safety overall. What you can glean from this for the advanced exam, of course, is that you really need to be concentrating on transmitters and receivers. no big surprise in there, but technical aspects, 11. Electromagnetic compatibility, yeah, there are 10 questions. So a big chunk of the exam is going to come out of those 3 headings. If you're going for the intermediate, have a look in your intermediate manual. This list, not exactly like this, but these headings are more or less the same. The numbers, the leaning towards each of these questions is shown in those manuals. So have a look at it. It will help you to decide where you need to be focusing your studying to do the exams. Okay? Another very useful resource. If you go into the RSGB site, they have mock papers that you can download and you could sit. I'll come back to that one again a little bit later. What I wanted to say is that the exam secrets, a lot of you have probably grabbed this magazine if you're intent on doing the exams. It's, for those of you who don't know what it is, it gives you mock questions and answers for all 3 of the exams, the foundation, intermediate and advanced, and a lot of general information about the exams in terms of the actual questions themselves. So, as I said earlier on about content, this is an excellent magazine or manual to get a good feel on the content that you can expect to have in the exams. Now, I've talked to a number of people about this, and actually there are some chat rooms online, believe it or not, about this exam secrets. And the consensus of opinion seems to be that the questions that you get in this manual are quite complicated. Let me clarify that. They're suggesting that these are harder than you're likely to get in the exams. Now, I'm not sure whether that's true or otherwise, but an awful lot of people seem to be suggesting that. I'm flagging this up to you because I want to be sure that you realize if you start working your way through this, or you may have already done so, and you start to think, oh dear, I'm not ready for the exams yet, maybe not necessarily true. The fact that they're difficult, if you can answer them, well and good. You must be ready for the exam. Go ahead, go and do it. You're going to pass. If you're not sure, don't get put off by the complexity of some of these questions on the grounds that, as I say, they may be more complicated than you're actually going to get in the genuine exam. Okay, so enough said on that as in terms of resources. Intermediate practical assessments. Oh yeah, okay. I said at the very beginning that the presentation was put together in January. It was designed as a stand-up presentation, face-to-face in front of my audience. So at that time, of course, you still had to do the practical assessments before you could apply and take either the intermediate or the foundation exams. It's not applicable for the full exam. But I thought for completeness, I would just leave this in here this evening just to talk about it. So some of you may be interested in, I don't know what stage of your training you might be, but some of you may be interested in working out or finding out what do we have in these assessments. They're great fun. I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed my intermediate work that I did. I did that within the Sutton and Cheam Radio Society. They were good enough to help me go through these. They signed them all off for me, and I went off and did the exam elsewhere because it wasn't available to me at the time. But the kind of things you have to do, there are 6 headings that they cover. Wiring a plug is one, which I think probably most of us could probably do quite easily, so it's not a big deal. Connectors, the fitting a PL259 or an SO239 to a coax cable, whether it's soldered or whether it's just a compression fitting. It doesn't make clear in that heading there. They need to know that you can solder reasonably, so soldering is part of it, of course, which is, again, great fun. Construction, reading colour codes, bands on resistors and inductors. I'll say what's in my mind at the moment, and that is that, again, that's something you need to be able to do, or in most cases you do, not least because of our hobby, but also because the RSGB kind of like asking questions on resistors and bands, etc. So that's something that's worth, trying to get your head around. I'm going to try and help you with that a little bit later. Build a simple test circuit with a battery or the lead, what have you. Perform measurements. The multimeter, you need to demonstrate you can use a multimeter. Add a transistor to a circuit demonstrating that it acts as a switch, etc. I had one little project which did all of that in one go. The final two is you've got to calibrate or do a frequency oscillator, calibrate a VFO effectively, and do a little project. The little project I did was to build a very small AM radio, little kit, and it worked. It had to work, otherwise I wouldn't have got all the accolation I needed for the practicals that I was doing. But you, as I said, at this moment in time, don't need to worry about the practical session. Right, I've got the headers here of the syllabus. Syllabuses? Whatever. You know what I mean. There's one there for intermediate and there's one for the full exam. They're just to flag up what I want to talk about here. I have seen quite a number of syllabuses for various exams over my years in work and as part of my job as an examiner. And usually you have headings with a small explanation as to what the heading is referring to. The reason I'm specifying this and stressing this is that if you haven't done so already, I recommend very strongly have a look at the syllabus that's applicable to whichever exam you're thinking of doing, and even download it and have a little read of it, because they are extensive. They are very extensive for the RSGB. In fact, to such a point that you could, I get a sneaking suspicion, almost take the exams from what's specified in the syllabus. They really do. They're an excellent document for revision. They'll certainly pick up any areas of weakness that you have and possibly even give you the answer in the process. So download these that's applicable to you, have a read through them. I'm not expecting you to learn them, of course, because there's quite a few pages in them. But do read them through and keep them close at hand as a revision document. They are very, very useful indeed. Just give you kind of an idea as to what we're talking about. I've just randomly, there's no particular reason as to why I've picked this page. What did I do? It's an intermediate exam syllabus. It's page 4 of 21 pages, it says there. I just literally, I did this for my own sake as much as anybody else's. I've just grabbed it, thrown it onto the PowerPoint presentation, just to kind of show you what I'm talking about here. Let's, here we go. Look, if you just look at number 9, if you look at number 9, then we'll have a little read of that. It says, recall it, like they like the word recall. You'll get absolutely fed up of hearing them say recall. Recall that a capacitor normally consists of 2 metal plates separated by an insulating material, and that its capacitance is measured in farads. There's 2 exam questions there. You know what? I mean, I've had questions where they've asked you, a capacitor is measured in farads, volts, henries, ohms. Well, there's the answer to your question. If you go down, let's jump a little here. Let's go to the end of the 90. Recall that some capacitor, there's an excellent one, look. Recall that some capacitors are electrolytic and polarized and must be correctly connected to avoid injuries, safety again, look, and damage or destruction to the devices. Let's have a look what's further down. Under the relative movement of conductors in a magnetic field will induce a voltage across the ends of the conductor. Yeah. Recall that a current passing through a wire form a magnetic field around the wire. These are all things that are very basic to us that we have to learn for the exams. It's there written down in front of you. And if you just go through these syllabuses, then you'll get this information, which will be very useful to you. If not, as I say, just for revision as a tool to be learning what you need for your actual examinations. How are we doing for time? 46 minutes, good, yeah, we're doing okay, I think. I've timed this to be around about an hour. I think that's about as much concentration as people can usually hold on something like this. So, mock examination papers. As I've said, you can use the exam secrets. There's mock questions in there, but you can also download the mock papers from the RSGB sites are relevant to the particular exam you're going to do. Now, when I was doing my exams, I think I'm right in saying there was just one mock paper for each of the exams. Now, since then, because last year when I took my advanced exam, it was the new syllabus. So I sat the new syllabus for the full exam, as opposed to studying for about a year prior to that for the old syllabus. But now they have got 2 mock papers for each of the papers, one for the new syllabus and one for the old. Don't let that put you off. There's really not that much of a difference, in fairness. I mean, you probably already know that they've introduced SDR and digital requirements for the full exam now, and probably also, I suspect, in the intermediate. I've not looked. But those are the real changes they've made. They've taken a little bit out of the exam from the past old syllabuses. But they haven't changed that much, and certainly not for what I'm just about to say. I would very strongly recommend that when you think you are ready to do the exam, the way to find out, of course, is for you to download the mock paper from the RSGB site and lock yourself away in a room somewhere in the house and time yourself. If it's the intermediate, you've got 90 minutes. If it's the advanced, then you've got 2 hours. Lock yourself away for that time and genuinely work through the paper. Now, that'll do 2 or 3 things for you. One, it will give you some idea of what it's like to genuinely sit there and do the exam, obviously. But it will also tell you how much time you've got in the exam. I think you will find that you've got adequate time to get through the exam. These mock papers, by the way, have got the answers to the questions at the end. So you can mark the paper also. And that's quite important, because you can then tell, what pass mark did I get? What percentage pass did I get? How many answers did I get right? Now, I worked to the principle that if I could get 70% of the marks from doing the exam, the mock exam at home, then I must be pretty much ready. 60% is the pass mark, as I've already said. If I can do 70% of them in a genuine mock exam environment, then I should be able to pass the real exam by going along to the examining centre, as was, not necessary anymore. Yeah. So my advice is download the mock paper, work your way through it consistently to the timings, mark it, and then see how you've done. That will give you a good handle on whether you're ready to take the exam. You don't want to turn up to the exam and get a nasty shock and find your timing's out or something of this kind. Oh, I don't know whether you can see this. Again, what I've done here, don't worry, guys. I've no intention of just answering all these questions for you. It's of no value at all. I said this is not intended to be a mini course in these exams at all. What I've done is, I've just randomly pulled these sheets, much for my purposes as for you. By randomly throwing them out on paper, I thought, what does this actually tell me? If I now look at these papers, there's 2 here. The one on the right-hand side, or left-hand side rather, is for the intermediate, and the one on the left-hand side here is a full mock paper. Now, the first thing that struck me when I threw these papers down or dragged them out and put them onto the PowerPoint presentation, I started to look at them, I suddenly realised that there's virtually no maths on these 2 papers. And that's just random. Okay, I know you're going to say, well, there's a maths question up here, John, and there's a maths question down here. Okay, look, I had said to you earlier, I have no background in electronics or electrics or anything to do with radio science at all. This question here, a table lamp is rated at 60 watts, and it also tells us a suitable fuse in it, mains plug would be. Mains plug, so it straight away is telling you there's 230 volts, isn't it? And you've got a 60-watt bulb. What I actually would know almost instinctively, they say, well, there's not much current going through this lot, so you want the weakest fuse that you can find. So going down this list here, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, well, 3 amps probably. The only 3 you're going to get for 13 amp fused plug, as you know, is 13 amp, 5 amp or 3 amps. So it has to be one of those. You've eliminated one there straight away, look. So even if you guessed one of those, you're going to get a higher percentage chance of getting it right. So I could guess that answer. Now, of course, if you wanted to do the question genuinely, yes, okay, you'd use the power formula, P equals VI. But even when you're using the power formula, P equals VI, you need current, of course, I as the subject. So if you had I the subject, it would be P over V. I'm sure you guys already know that. So you'd put P, the power, which is watts, 60 watts, over the 230 volts, and you get something like about 0.26 amps. Now, even having done the question there, by using a formula, That wouldn't have taken you very long. What I'm trying to say is, I don't really consider this to be a full-scale maths question per se. What else have we got in here? Oh yes, I said about safety earlier on. There's a classic safety question for you here, look. And I didn't know that was there, I promise you. That was this question 43 come up. And it says here, the best reason for using hand tools in the way they were intended is to reduce the chances of injury. Yeah, that's a pretty good suggestion. Prolong the life of the tool. Really? I can buy another one if need be. Reduce the amount of swarf and dust created. Well, that could be a safety issue. Speed up the work. Do I really care? Well, possibly might speed up the work, but who really cares? Now, I was saying to you earlier on that you could just guess one of these answers and you get 25% of the chance of getting it right. But look, just going through this, we're all sitting there thinking, yeah, you've got to be joking. Prolong the life of the tool? No, I don't think so. Speed up the work? No, don't think so. So you've got B and D. It's pretty unlikely to be the answer. So now if you pick out reduce the chances of injury or reduce the amount of swarf and dust created. I remember doing metal work and they were always telling us in school, this long time ago, make sure you keep your work area clean. You can damage yourself with swarf. Yeah, okay, enough said. So that could be. So you've got now A or C could be the correct answers. You could guess that and you've got a 50% chance now of being right. You've eliminated two of the answers straight away. I want to show you that again in a second. Show you what I'm trying to get across here is you can guess these, but it's a bit of educated guesswork. It's not simple guesswork. If you're only getting 25% on a guess, you're not doing the job correctly. Okay. Well, I suppose, look, yeah, okay. Well, if you look at 44, question 44, transformer. So they're saying you want to put a multimeter across P and Q and measure the voltage. And they're saying, what do you set your multimeter to? You've got to do, well, you would have had to have done practical work with a multimeter. So there's a question on a multimeter here. So if you put your multimeter, set it to volts, you put it across the 5 volts. What have we actually got here? We've got an isolating transformer there. We've got 230 volts here. So it's obviously acting as a transformer across here. It's reducing the voltage from 230 to 5 volts. You've got a diode here, a rectifying diode, and you've got a smoothing capacitor. But we're not measuring this. We're measuring across here, which is just this bit. So the diagram's pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty obvious what you're doing. So really what they're saying, what you've got is a reduction in power here of voltage. Nothing to do with anything other than that. If you look at the answers here again, look. A, now they're in groups of 2. You've got DC, DC, AC, AC. Okay, 10 volts, yeah, because you often have to set your multimeter to a higher reading, of course, than the voltage you're measuring. You all know that, I'm sure. And you've got, oh, hang on, I've gone too far. Amps. Amps? We're measuring voltage here, not current. So look at this, look. How simply could the RSGB be trying to get us to answer the question correctly, guys? They're almost giving us the answer here. Look, it's not B, it's not D. I can guess A or C and get a 50% chance. But if we've looked at the diagram, we know it's a isolating transformer. It's reduced the power from 230 to 5 volts. Set it to 10 volts. What are we talking about? Is this DC? Well, this isn't. This is AC. It's mains voltage. So the probability is this is still AC. It's not been rectified. So therefore, the answer has to be C, because it's AC voltage at this particular point. Anyway, enough said on that one. You can do the same thing with all of these. I think that the point, I've just put those in. I think the point is demonstrated with what I've tried to put across here. This one I said earlier that the RSGB do like questions on resistors, and in the longer term it's probably quite wise for you, and certainly for the full exam, to learn how to determine what the ohmic reading is of a resistor from the bands. Now I want to look at this in a little bit more detail. So this is question 46. I want to bring this a little bit more into detail so we can see it more clearly. Again, sorry to labour this particular point. If you know, you've got the bands here, you're probably aware that the last band, the gold, is just quite simply to give you the tolerance on it, and gold is 5%. So these first 3 bands are the bands which are irrelevant to us. and that we really need to know. Yellow is 4. Now, straight away, 4. Oh, stop doing that. Okay, 4. Look, there are 2 answers which begin with 4. So already you know it can't be C or D. It has to be one of these 2 answers. So the next one along, violet, is 7. So, okay, 4, 7, yeah, okay, well, that doesn't help me very much. And the third one along, of course, 2, red, 4, 7, 2. Great, we got the answer. Careful. I did say to you to be very careful in the exam. I don't know if that's just done because you could read it, 4, 7, 2. I suspect most of you realise it's the first 2 bands which give us the actual number. The third band is the multiplier. How many zeros there are? It's the multiplier. It's not one of the numbers. So what we have here is 4700, 4,700 ohms. So which one is the correct answer of these 2? I'm not expecting an answer because you're all on mute, guys. None of them is the answer. Of course, there's a misprint. This is not me. I didn't doctor this, I swear to you. This came out of the paper. If you look at the paper tomorrow, dig out the, what would you say this was? I think it was the intermediate paper off the RSGB website. You'll see that that error is in there. They've obviously got a misprint. It's a typo. They put 7 there. They meant to put 0. So that should read 4700. So there's your answer. But you can see how you could work it out by deduction. I suspect all you guys realise that the colour coding on inductors and resistors are the colours of the rainbow. I don't know if you've actually tumbled to that. I mean, you've got 10 colours on. This is how I remember it. This is what I'm pointing out to you. I had to learn this in the last few years because I didn't know that. I wasn't really familiar with resistors and inductors either. So I suddenly realised when I was looking at these one day that, oh, there's colours of the rainbow. Let me explain. If you've got colours of the rainbow, you've got 10 colours that you can actually have on a resistor or on an inductor. It starts with black. Well, of course, many of us would know that black isn't actually a colour. It's a non-existent. Where there's no light at all, it's black. So it's nothing. It's 0. The first marker, which is black in the colours of the rainbow, is 0. So I always remember that black is 0. Fine. So if I get black on a resistor, I know it's a 0 of some kind. Now, the next colour that comes along is starting to become a genuine colour as we know it, i.e. brown. So that's 1. So if you look at a list of the colours of these bands on a resistor, it will actually tell you that it's 1. Red is 2, orange 3, etc., etc., etc. Now, there are mnemonics that you can use to remember these things if you can't remember the actual colours themselves. One classic one is Roy G. Biv. It's an odd one. I used to use in work Real Old Yokels Gorge Beef in volumes. There's another one, Richard of York gave battle in vain. That's not one I'm that familiar with. But each of the first letters obviously are the colours of the rainbow. Now, I warn you that on the colours of the rainbow or the colours used for resistors, we don't have indigo. So you could trip yourselves up there. So that BV is what you really need there. So using the colour coding correctly, we do know that the answer to that question is 4.7 thousand ohms with a 5% tolerance, as we've said. Okay. Up to an hour. I need to get myself moving here. We're nearly done, by the way. I wanted to cover some maths issues. I said a lot of the guys that I spoke to in the radio club are concerned about mathematics in the exam. I've tried to make it clear to you, look, don't worry yourself too much about it. There is not that much maths in these papers. You can get away with just the theory. I've said enough on that. So maths issues. Simply, let's get this one. Probably all of you have got a reasonable scientific calculator. If you haven't, you need to get yourself one, a non-programmable one. Don't forget, if you're doing the online exams, you will have an invigilator watching your every move, and they'll know if you've got a programmable calculator. But not just simply get yourself a decent calculator that you can use, learn to use it. Now, for our radio exams, what you really need to be able to do is logs and antilogs, in my experience. You need to be able to do squares and square roots. You need to be able to do reciprocals, 1 over something, and exponents. Exponents are very important to us. Exponents is the exponent button down on here on this particular calculator. That's not mine, by the way. It's just one I photographed off the internet. Exponents are the numbers, again, pretty sure most of you know this, 10 to the power 10, 9, 6, whatever. The reason for using this is, as you know, we have huge numbers with zeros attached to them, 0.000000. If you're multiplying that by another number which you've got 000, you are going to get it wrong. You get 1 0 wrong, your answer is going to be wrong. The only safe way of ensuring that you don't make a mistake with loads of noughts, as my friend John Milton would say, is to use exponents. Use 10 to the -9 or 10 to the 6 or 10 to the 3 and what have you. The other thing I realized was quite early on that you do need to learn these things. I was never that au fait with milli, yes, probably, but things like, you know, micro as opposed to nano and pico and such like. It's very, very important that you do learn those for the exams and be able to attach that to the exponent, pico being -12, 10 to the -12, etc. It will make it so much easier. You just don't have to think about it anymore when you've got the question in front of you. Ah, yeah, my favourite subject, I don't think. Decibels. The RSGB love talking to us in terms of decibels. Yeah, okay, radio science, a lot of the textbooks and such like talk about decibels. And it's something you do need to know and do need to understand and learn. I, parrot fashion, learned that 3 decibels is times 2, 6, 4, and 9, 8, etc. And 10 is 10 times, it's very useful. And 20 is 100, 30, etc. That's all very fine, and yes, I could work out real numbers to decibels. I was worried that when I came to the nervous environment of an exam and a question in front of me, the RSGB, I realised by this stage, like 2-tier questions, especially in mathematical questions, where you have to calculate something to get something, or a formula or whatever, before you can then do another calculation to get the answer. There may only be very simple calculations, but there are 2 tiers to them. And one of the other things they like doing in that concept is to maybe get you to put decibels in the part of the question with standard type, you know, 100 watts has a gain of 16 decibels or something. And you're left scratching your head thinking, well, I was anyway. The only way I could get around that was to simply learn that formula. I thought it was just much easier. So I can convert very easily back and forth between decibels and gains of any number you like using that formula down here. Now, for any of you that are nervous about exams and formula and such like, let me explain. That is a very simple, straightforward formula. There are no really complicated formulas that we have to know about to do these exams genuinely. So N, for those of you who are not initiated in it, N means any number you like. Yeah, so you can put any number you like in here, and it says log n, or what is the log of n is what it's saying, multiplied by 10 will give the decibels. For example, if I just said, I've got 50 watts, let's say, we stick 50 in that position with n, and I get the log of 50, which is 1.7. It says multiply by 10, so you move the decimal place, 17. So if I've got 50 watts in here, the decibel equivalent of that from this formula is 17 watt decibels. Simple. And you can work it backwards. I did that because I thought, no, I don't feel comfortable and confident in not being able to do that. And I used that in the exams. There were a couple of questions where I just bunged that formula in, did the calculation, took me 2 seconds to do it. And I thought, well, right, there's the answer, and away you go. I didn't worry about trying to work it out in my head. This is the good and the bad news. Those are all the formulas that you need to know for your intermediate exam. Okay, quite a number. I'm a bit puzzled. I'll just say I'm a bit puzzled as to why, for something like a resistor, they give you a formula. And I think most of us know that if you have resistors in series, you can just add them up. So that's making it overly complicated than you actually need. It's not quite so simple if they're in parallel, of course, because you do need to do the reciprocal. I did say you do need to do reciprocals on your calculators. There's some reciprocals, the reciprocal of the answer. That's the bad news, because that's what you need to have available to you for the advanced or full exam. Lots and lots of formulae. The good news is that you're actually given this in your exams. In the intermediate and advanced exams, you're given these in the data sheets. So you don't need to learn them. Well, that's what the RSGB say. They say you don't have to learn them. if you don't know what each of these formulas is used for, you're going to have a problem, because you've got a question in front of you and you think, oh, which formula do I use? So you do have to kind of learn it. You don't have to remember them, is the point I'm trying to make here. You know, as long as you've got a gist of the idea that, for example, and I'm doing this purposely, you've got here the formula here, which gives you the resonant frequency formula from an LC or tank circuit. So you've got the inductor, you've got the capacitor, and you want to know what the resonant frequency is. That's all very fine. That's getting on about as complicated as they become. I realized quite early on that, yeah, you can manipulate that to produce, hopefully you can see that, guys. I don't know how many of the images are interfering with what I've got on the side here, but you can manipulate this formula to get this formula, which I can just about do. But again, I wasn't confident at doing the exam, and below me, would you believe it? I actually had a question in the exam which gave me the frequency and the capacitor, and they wanted to know what the inductor would be to give me that resonant frequency. So I needed that formula. Fortunately, I had actually learnt that formula. The reason I learnt it was because I was dealing with that in my manual. I could see this formula where they'd actually already done it for me, and I noticed it wasn't on the list of formula which you're given in the exams, and it was a pretty fortunate thing that I did learn that. So maybe take a lesson from this, guys. Learn that formula. If you don't learn anything else, the others they'll just give you, okay? Now, the RSGB do suggest that you use this formula triangle. That's fine. I'm personally not very happy with the formula triangle. Some people will learn in different ways and different speeds. Some people like the formula triangle. For those of you not uninitiated, you've got the Ohm's law here. And if you want to find the current, if you cover current, it's V over R. If you want to find the resistance, you put V over I, etc. The problem is, of course, you have to accurately learn this triangle. I think there's some saying which says something like volts over current and resistance or something. But as I say, I didn't learn that, because if you get that wrong way round, you're finished, because you are not going to be able to answer the questions correctly. Because if you get that wrong, it's the end of story. I tend to learn formula, if I'm going to learn them at all, as a one-liner, as I'd call it, V equals IR, and then manipulate that formula to produce the two on either side. That's a very straightforward thing to do. I'm pretty sure, hopefully, that most of you are capable of doing that. But that's up to you entirely. That's one of them. You've got the same thing for the power formula as well that you can use to get the formulas that you require in the exams. Now, I put in here formula manipulation. I just want to make a few very quick points. We're 10 minutes, or going on for 10 minutes past. I want to get this completed so you can ask me any questions that you may have. Simple formula. It's the power formula. I just mentioned that. P equals VI. Now, I'm pretty sure all of you must know that if you turn that formula around, it's exactly the same, obviously. If P equals VI, VI must equal P. It's the same thing, so you can turn them around. In mathematics textbooks, they say you can do whatever you like to one side of the formula as long as you do exactly the same thing to the other side. And what the textbooks will actually say to you is if you want to, say, get current I as the subject in this here formula, then what you would do here is to divide both sides by the V to remove the V from this side. So put V underneath V, V into V cancels out, and you end up with V under P. So that formula doesn't, hopefully, I don't know if you can see this, guys, but it should read underneath the images of us here, I equals P over a V, yeah? So you can use that formula, nice and simple. That's almost as complicated as most of this becomes. Now, I don't tend to do that. I suppose in a sense I do, but I don't tend to do that. For a long time, for many years, doing formulas of this kind, I tend to use what I call, it's not my terminology, inverse function. We all know that, can I say, the opposite of plus is minus, the opposite of times is divide, the opposite of square is a square root. Now, okay, you have to learn those things, but I think probably most of us know that. And if you know that, and if you look at the equal sign and take in mind that if you move something from this side to this side, the inverse function applies. For example, you've got V times I, VI means V times I. So if it's multiplied on this side, then that V is going to be divided into P on the other side. So if you just move that V from there to P underneath, it must be divided. It can't be times on the other side. Does that make sense to you guys? It's multiplied on this side, it must be divided on the other side. Inverse function. just to give you a demonstration, this always threw me, this formula. It's the impedance formula for a coax cable, which some of you will probably recognize. It's also used to calculate a stub or a conversion form, a transformer using a quarter wave coax stub. Yeah, that's it. Now, whenever I've needed to use this formula, I've always needed to find Z in. Maybe that's just my bad luck, but it's not the subject. They put the impedance of the coax cable first, and yes, it's a one-liner, so you can learn this. So if we wanted to get Z in, I'll need to move Z out onto the other side. It's multiplied here, and by simply dividing both sides by Z out, if you want to do it that way, or just saying if I take it's multiplied here, it must be divided into ZO on the other side. That's what you get. So you've now isolated Z in, and you've got your formula ready to go. It's no more than that. I've then turned it round finally over here. It doesn't mean any difference. I've already said that that's exactly the same as that is exactly the same. Slightly more complicated one, you've got an I squared, just to prove the point about the inverse function. Let's assume that we want the current to be the subject. Now you might look at that and think, oh my goodness, I've got an I squared. No, it's no more difficult than the very first one that we've done here, look. We need to remove the R and get it to the other side. You hopefully got the message now. If you move the R, which is multiplied by on this side, it must be divided into P on that side. So we can do that straightforward enough, easy. I haven't done a calculation or anything, okay? But I've still got the I squared. Now I can turn that round and say I squared equals P over R, yeah. But what about the I squared? I don't want I squared, I want I. If I move the square principle over from this side, it square roots the whole of the other side, because the opposite of square is a square root. Again, I'm sure you guys know that. So the result, and I can't see it there, gives you is I equals square root of both P and R, not P or R, but both of them. Okay, enough said. Now, hopefully that's been a revision for you, if nothing else, of formula manipulation. It's about as far as you need to go. Reference data sheets. These are two reference data sheets from the RSGB. These reference sheets are quite amazing as well. There's loads and loads of information in here, but you're given these in the exam. There are 16 pages of reference sheet for the full exam. There's only 4 or thereabouts in the intermediate and the foundation exams. I would add, and I've forgot to mention that earlier on, for the intermediate exam, by the way, one of the bits of information you have from the data sheet is a list of the values of the resistor, 0 to 9. So for the intermediate exam, you don't have to learn the color coding for a resistor. It's given to you in the data sheet. So when you start the exam, it's there. It's an open book. So any questions on resistors, look up the answer. You can't get it wrong because it's in front of you, okay? Now, you can get lots of information from here. There are pages, I said 16 pages. If I'd have been on a stand-up presentation, I was going to show you guys these and hand them out so you could flip through them while I just finished off the presentation. Unfortunately, it's not something I can do here this evening. So what I can do is to kind of give you a feel for what you've got. They tell you all kinds of information. You need to read these yourself. Have a look at them, download them, and read what they tell you. They'll give you lots of the answers to the questions. If you carry on, I've just put these in here. These are some of the headings, not all of them, but these are some of the headings that you actually get in the full data sheet. So there's lots and lots of very useful information there. One of them, which was very fortunate for my exams, I didn't learn the data sheets. I mean, I printed it off for the advanced exam, and I read it through a few times, get a feel and a handle for where everything was. And that was very, very, very useful, because a question I had in the exam, I can't remember exactly what it was now, but it's something to do with the 60-meter band and 5 megahertz. And they were asking a question, something about what band or what frequency do you need to have your personal telephone, or some such wording, available? Now, if you're doing your intermediate from the foundation, you'll think, I've now completely lost the plot. Let me just draw your attention down here. These are all the regulations that apply to using. For the advanced, you have to have the advanced qualification to use the 5 megahertz band, 60 meters. But if you're using it, there's quite a few regulations that you have to consider, because it's mainly, its primary usage is for the military. And down here it says, the licensee shall only operate the station to the extent that the licensee can be contacted on telephone, which is located in a proximity of the station. So what it's saying there, you have to your mobile phone, which mobile phone number the RSGB would probably have, or your home telephone number. The military might actually contact you to tell you, can you clear off, you're on our frequency, we're trying to use it. But that's an interesting question in an exam. It was in my exam, it was there. I couldn't remember quite what it was saying. I remembered I thought, it's there. It's in the data sheet. I know it is. There's quite a few other things there that I was going to actually talk to you. So I'm going to finish off here now. Try and sum up in what I've actually tried to get across here to you this evening. Do's and don'ts. The most important point here, to save yourself time, I've made the point here, don't sequentially work through the questions. Work through the questions. If you can do them confidently, fine, yep, fantastic, wonderful, work right the way through. If you hit the question you're not sure about, don't waste time worrying about it. Go to your next question, go to your next question, go to the next. As I've said to you, you might just going through the paper, you could possibly pass the exam at that point. Depends how many questions you passed on, of course, but you might just have passed the exam even without going back. If you've now saved time, you can always go back and look at those questions, maybe guess them, but try and put an educated guess into that. If you're unhappy about any of the maths, leave these questions until the last because of what I said and go back to them. You'll probably have more time left than you actually realise. As I said, I had about an hour to do the last 10 questions. Any questions you can't answer, leave them till the end and go back to them. We've already said that. Answer all questions, even if it's a guess. Now, that was put together at the beginning of the year when you might be considering doing a paper, the optical mark sheet system, which is what I did. But if it's obviously online, you don't have a choice. You do have to answer all 100% of the questions, even if you just simply guess them. And as I said, you can get 25% just by simply guessing them. There's plenty of time in each exam to complete the questions. There's no doubt about that. I've never had a problem with timings. If you have enough time, don't make the mistake that so many people do. I mean, you know, I've never done this. Go back over your paper, check the answer to your questions. In my foundation, I saw one answer and I thought, what are you thinking? So I changed it because I hadn't actually filled in the optical mark sheet with the heavy black pen at that stage. But it was clearly the wrong answer. I don't know whether I just too swiftly answered it or something, but it was the wrong answer. So if you've got the time, go back over your paper. If you're satisfied with that, fine. Then you've got all the time you need. Final bit of advice. Whatever you do, do not fall into the trap at any time, however hard your exam happens to be, to think that you have failed the exam. You must never, ever, ever do that. As a practical exam, and I've done extensive work as a practical exam, you can see the candidate in front of you, you're asking them questions. Unfortunately, the poor souls are being bombarded with all these questions. You've got a mark sheet as an examiner that you have to get ticks against to give them the marks. So you have to keep pushing them for answers. Now, they can misconstrue that if it's not handled well enough, that, oh my goodness, you know, I'm really not answering these questions correctly, I've failed. Now, I've seen people just clamp up in the middle of a practical exam. It's not so obvious in the theory, but we do, it's possible to do it in the theory exams as well. Don't, therefore, think that you failed the exam. You haven't failed the exam until somebody tells you you failed the exam. The probability is, if you take on board what I've tried to get across here this evening, approach the exam in a scientific manner, do what's necessary to make it easier for you to pass the exams, and I wish you every success when you then decide to do foundation or the intermediate or the advanced exams. Very good, best of luck to all of you guys. So with that, I'm done. A little bit longer than I was expecting to be. Do you have any questions for me? Oh, I've totally baffled you with science.
John, thank you very much. Well, yeah, has anybody got any questions, any comments, any other advice for anybody else about, I've obviously got a mix of people on the exam, the call tonight. Yeah, Leslie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the very, very interesting presentation, John. Very interesting indeed. And I'm very glad about your enthusiasm about the subject. That really does come across.
Thanks for that.
Right, couple of things I've noticed. One of the things is with students I've noticed if they have unrealistic expectations of how to start out in a few weeks, and I'll come back to them in a few weeks. Well, this cropped up, and well, I couldn't do this, and every single time I hear that, I just know it's not going to happen. My own take is, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, is it's better to do lots of small little bites.
Absolutely right.
On the bus,
Yeah.
oh, I'm on the, and even if it's 10 minutes, doesn't matter, and then build on those blocks, but over a period, over a realistic period.
You know what, Leslie? I'll just intervene there. You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more, 100%. Because I mean, if you look at and analyse how we learn, I don't know why the power's going on and off in the house here with me. Our long-term memory works on the basis of exactly what you're saying. So our long-term memories work on the basis that you do a little chunk of stuff and learn it. If you don't go back to it a few days later, you start to forget it. This is normal for all of us. But if you go back to it a few days later, it reiterates what you've already learned, and it strengthens what you've already learned. If you do it again a little while later, it strengthens it even further. If you keep doing that, that's how we learn. This is how we remember things in the long term. It's normal. So you're absolutely right. If they're trying to learn these things at the last minute before the exam, they're never going to do it. There's no way. They're going to fail.
Thank you, John.
Was there another question in there? I thought you had another one there, Leslie.
Yeah, the other one I've got on soldering as well. We had an issue at one of the training centres, and what had happened is that the soldering irons, the supply cable had melted, exposing the inner conductor. Yeah, so what I would reiterate, well, actually, I threw them in the bin. But
quite right.
What I would iterate is that if people have got training equipment, to make sure that that's safe before they use it.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. Because as I said, you know, the RSGB are very, very keen to get this safety message across. As you just described there, it's very easy with a hot soldering iron to catch the actual line and burn through the metal, the insulation. And of course, you've then got a big problem.
We actually put heat shrink sleeving on to prevent this from happening.
Right, yeah, good idea, good idea. I notice, Chris, that we've got 7 questions here, so I suppose I'm supposed to be ticking these.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's have a look through the
We've got 7 of them.
We've got questions.
Thank you, Leslie, for the comments, that's great.
We've got a few questions and a few points. I mean, perhaps I invite people to if anyone wants to sort of jump in with their question, or we can read them out from the screen if needs be.
What have we got here? Happened years ago, someone at Sutton Club caught a falling soldering iron, not naming persons. I don't know what that's quite about.
It wasn't me, Paul, I don't think. And
it wasn't me, no. I think that's in line with possibly Leslie's question about getting burnt insulators.
Good evening, everybody. I think I only know Chris, possibly, at the moment. I'm an old Sutton Club member who moved away years ago, so it was nice to be invited to come and see the talk. No, it happened at the Banstead Hall one session. Someone knocked it and caught the soldering iron on the hot end. So.
All right. So, Chris, we've got questions at the bottom here.
Well, I think we've actually got, because obviously we've got a real mix of people on the call. We've got 23 people on the call in it. A mix of, it looks like people that have got lots of experience and people that are probably looking to take their exams soon. So, you know, we've got lots of people giving advice and things on here. I think Richard does some advice about not necessarily pushing students so they don't panic. Dan's put a few things on there, but yeah, you know, has anybody else got any questions they want to ask John before we finish up, or anybody got any other advice for anybody else looking to take their exams soon?
Anybody disagree with anything I've said? I'm quite happy for you to disagree with me. It's just my own opinion as to what I've come across in analysing the licensing exams from the RSGB. I hear all kinds of comments when we're in the radio club on a Monday evening about good and bad. But
I mean, some of the things, you know, we go through exam technique when we do, as you know, John, we've done the training course, and it's just things like, you know, simple things like when you're taking the exam and you got multiple choice, make sure you read all the answers, because it's very easy to go to question 1 and say, oh, look, the answer is A, not having read realising actually it is wrong. You know, read all the answers and take your time, and absolutely at the end of the exam, go back and chances are you're going to have some free time at the end. Go back and reread the answers and just double check. Like you say, you can sometimes spot when you made an obvious mistake because you've rushed it. So
That's what I was saying about
really good. Yeah, it's a really good.
Alluding to earlier on, Chris, that you know, you really need to carefully read the question, but you also have a very good point you're making, actually, Chris. Very carefully read the answers, because the one I showed, there were potentially 2 answers that it could have been. It was the first one, A, but there were 2 potential safety answers in that question. So you need to analyse the answers very carefully and make sure you are answering the right one.
Absolutely. And sometimes things like the word not appear in a question and answer, you just sometimes miss that. It'll say which is not the right answer, and you might not see the word not, and then you say, oh, that's the right answer, and actually 3 of them are correct, and actually it's the one that's wrong is the right answer, if that makes sense. That sort of thing. So they can catch you out. And I think you made a good point. I think earlier on you talk about, you know, perhaps if you see a question that's really difficult, especially if it's the first question on the paper and you start to panic, don't worry about it. Just move on. Do all the ones that you can do. That helps to build up your confidence. I think you were saying earlier, it's about building up your confidence. So, you know, if you do get a question that where you get stuck on, or you think, oh, blimey, you know, especially if it's one of the early questions, maybe the first question, you think, oh my God, oh my word, I'm not ready for this exam at all. Don't worry about that one. Move on, get a few under your belt, build up your confidence, and then you can realise, actually, even if you get that one wrong, probably passed anyway. And if
you probably passed. You probably passed.
At the end, go back and have a go at it. You know, and like you say, eliminate. You know, sometimes it's a question of elimination. Sometimes out of the 4 answers, 2 of them are obviously the wrong answer because it's the wrong sort of unit. It'll be a question about voltage, and there'll be amps as the answers. You know, this sort of thing. So generally, out of the 4 possible answers you get, 2 will be clearly wrong.
Yeah.
Then it's choice of 1 out of the 2, and then you can probably have a bit of a guess, like you were saying about the one with the. Was it the lamp and the fuse? You know, well, actually, it's probably 3 amp because that's the sort of things you're putting in it. You know,
because like even I, with no electrical background at all, would say, well, it must be 3 amps. Surely it can't be more than that.
So I think there's some really useful tips and tricks, and hopefully some of the guys on the call tonight will use that and hopefully go on to move up
Richard? Would Richard come up and explain that question? I didn't fully see that. Could we unmute Richard? Could you just put a question up there? And
there's Richard. There's Richard.
Where is Richard?
Hello, John. What it is, I've noticed on a couple of exams when, on the paper exams, not the electronic ones, I've little knowledge on those at the moment, that some people, a couple of times, and you of course don't notice this until the very end, and once we thought it was going to be an absolute disaster, but strange enough it turned out not to be, that, so how can I put it? There's your, it doesn't come out. You've got your list. I know, focus works terribly.
Yeah, I like that.
Ruler to do all your questions, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, right.
But while moving your head backwards and forwards and everything else, you've suddenly gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, missed 6. And your ruler, as I always advise people, use a transparent ruler to get your line right, have gone down to 7. So now you're answering all the questions and hopefully putting the right answers in the OCR box.
Very good point. Interesting.
But you're now, everything is 1 line down.
Yeah.
But now, I think the worst I've had of that was, how can I describe it? He's not here, so I can say, and we had an excellent outcome. The UK's oldest advanced exam taker.
Right.
He did this, and nobody noticed. Well, as you wouldn't, you're not there looking over his shoulder, of course, until the papers were being packed. And somebody, while packing them, noticed, sod it, there's a blank line here. Oh, he just didn't know, so he didn't write anything. And in talking to him afterwards, he said, no, I just carried with all of them. I didn't leave anyone out. Suddenly went, damn, he's missed a line and put everything else in 1 line lower. And that was at about 2/3 of the way down the question paper.
Ow.
Yes, so we've worked on a principle, you know, that's a lot to lose.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Oddly enough, while he was gutted, really, he passed,
Oh,
which was absolutely marvellous. But it was, he had never, he was a technical man, everything else, but his technical knowledge, his technical exams had been decades earlier for
right.
this script. The idea of doing optical character reading type exams, you know, going down, this was the first time he'd done it. And with his eyesight, glasses, varifocals, all the bits, he dropped a line by accident, missed it, and then input everything else in, hopefully correctly, but
Out of sync. Yeah.
one line down, out of sync.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he did pass, which was very, very good, because he was very upset, very emotional.
But that demonstrates what I was saying earlier. Of course, it's
Yeah.
a 60% pass.
Yeah.
You know, just keep going, answer the questions. The chances are you will probably pass. It's not a high pass rate.
Well, I've also, your comment that you made about how many things are technical, how many things are maths.
Yeah.
I had this on the first advanced exam I ever taught. 5 of them sitting there in front of me, all whinging and whining and virtually crying into their desks that they were all abject failures, and every single one of them was going to fail. You know, I had a biologist, a road worker, a housewife, a school student who was just about the most confident, and I can't remember what the other one was. Oh yes, a civil servant. And they were all whinging and moaning that every single one of them was going to fail because they didn't have the technical background or the mathematical background, and they're all going to die.
This is exactly what I've heard in the club, you know.
Breakdown of, you know, how many you've got, and said, well, you can still pass even if you get every maths question wrong.
Yep.
Common sense with the non-maths questions, the non-technical questions,
Preferably.
are a good block. Every single one of them passed.
Yeah, but there you go. I mean, thank you for that, Richard, because that's just confirming what I've actually been saying here this evening. The analysis of the exams tells you quite clearly that that is the case. You don't have to worry about the maths. There's not that many maths questions. If you don't do any of them, yeah, you might still pass.
Well, actually, bar the civil servant, the rest of them got most of the maths questions right.
Right. Well, that demonstrates that they're probably capable of doing it anyway. Yeah.
You know, they were actually better than they thought they were.
Yeah, that's always the case. I think we tend to go into with a lot of apprehension to exams. But as I said at the very beginning, you know, you need to know the format and the kind of content of the papers or the questions so that you have the confidence to be able to fully focus and concentrate on the questions in front of you. The exam then will just take care of itself. It really does.
Yeah.
Any other specific questions to me here, or any comments that somebody'd like to make in regard to anything we said, Richard? Anybody else there?
I think.
Go on, I've got one.
Yeah.
So thank you, Chris. John, I think tutors are going to strangle me on this one. Right, imagine a lecture room. Now, I've sort of come across situations where I know I'm not taking something in, and I'm sitting there, and I just know other people are not taking it in as well. Whatever the subject is, it doesn't really matter. One thing I did get into the habit of is after the lecturer had finished, is to go and see the lecturer, knock on his door and say, excuse me, Dr. So-and-so, or whatever it was, could you go over that again because I didn't get it? Now, that will drive tutors up the wall, but actually, later on when you pass, they will actually thank you for that, because they go, hang on, well, if he's asking the question, how about all those that didn't ask the question? You know, was that being presented correctly? Did I put that across okay? How many people actually understood that particular thing I was talking about? And I would urge students to, it doesn't matter what it is, if they're unsure, to say, sorry, I didn't get that. Could you go over that again, please? Any thoughts, John?
Yeah, absolutely. The point that you're making there is a very valid one. It's a good question, actually. I told my kids when they were quite young that if they, exactly the point you're making, if they didn't understand something in school with a teacher, to put their hand up and ask the question. Now, that's quite a difficult thing to do, especially for kids when they're quite young in school. But I got the message across to them in saying, look, I can guarantee it, if you don't understand something and you put your hand up and ask a question, some of your chums in the class, if they're being honest, will actually say, you know, I didn't understand either. That's an important thing to do. Of course, my two lads did actually do that, and they discovered exactly what I've just said, that chums of theirs in the class said, oh, I was too embarrassed to ask, but I didn't understand that, and now I do. Now, I'm not sure I agree that the tutors would be unhappy about them being badgered. I've done a lot of training over the years, and frankly,
they thank us later.
Yeah, well, I'm very happy when people ask a question. I'm happy to ask a question when I'm training them, because then I can approach it in a different way. As I said earlier, we all learn in different ways and different speeds. But it's certainly something that I would, encourage, frankly, that if your students in your group, don't understand something, either ask you in the lecture or whatever, or come and see you afterwards, because they may need to have it explained in a slightly different way. It's a great point you're making, though. People shouldn't be afraid to ask the questions of the lecturer. And as I said earlier, if they're in a club, talk to the other members and more experienced members in the club. They'll be delighted to tell you the answer to the questions. There's a lot of help out there. There really is. That's how I got through the exams, frankly.
Yes, fully agree. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Thanks for the questions there. Are there any other questions then, Chris? Or because I can see there are 16.
A few folks have dropped off, but I think just to sort of finish things off, obviously get everyone, if you are about to take your exam, the very best of luck, and hopefully some of the tips that John's given you tonight will really help you out and help you to get those extra marks. There are a few RSGB resources that may also help you. Andy, I don't know if you want to jump in and mention those.
Yeah, hello. For those of you that don't know me, hello, I'm Andy. So I used to be an SCRS member many years ago. John, good to see you again.
Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
Nice to see you, Andy.
I was having a chat with Chris in the background, and I was just saying it's good to see so many people I haven't seen for a while. So I now sit as a director for the RSGB. So there's just a couple of things I wanted to go through. So yeah, John, good talk. Around the exams. We've been trying really, really hard. We've had an unprecedented amount this year of people that have basically passed their foundation. So we're just over about 2,000 new licensees this year, foundations alone. So during lockdown, we decided that we had to get rid of the foundation practicals, right? And that has caused some problems. Not for everybody, but what we decided that we wanted to do is basically put a collection of videos together. So we've produced a foundation practical video, which you guys can find on YouTube if you haven't seen it already. There's a couple of M7s on here. I noticed, I don't know if they're still here. Hi Len and Valmo. That's on there if you guys need any help. So just go onto the YouTube site and have a look. We also have a Facebook group of which Chris is a moderator on, which is for new M7s and returning licensees as well. So we designed that as a safe space for M7s to be able to talk freely. And there was a lot of stuff going on with other Facebook groups where M7s were asking questions, and you had some of the more experienced guys that were, let's say, not necessarily giving them the right direction or being nice to them. So we did that. We have a big campaign coming up called Get on the Air for Christmas. So we did Get on the Air to Care. That was really successful. Got quite a bit of publicity out of that, but we're doing the same for Christmas. So it's designed to actively encourage you to get on air. And one other thing, and we'll take some questions. The AGM is in April. We are currently looking for new directors. We have one elected vacancy and some nominated as well. So if you're interested in trying to make a change, there's no license class restrictions on there. You can be an M7, foundation, intermediate or full if you wanted to get involved and got a bit of time to try and make a difference. That was all I had, Chris.
Thank
I don't
you,
know if
Andy.
don't know if anybody else has got any questions. I can't necessarily answer anything on the exams because it doesn't really sit under my remit. But I'm happy to take questions and email you some answers back if anybody has anything. I can talk to the right people. Cool.
Okay, I think a few folks have dropped off, to be fair, but thanks for that, Andy. That's really useful. And yeah, definitely look out for that Facebook group. There's quite a few. Like I say, it's kind of a safe space for people to ask questions and not get
there's no such thing as a
silly
stupid
question.
or silly question, right?
Exactly.
That's what it was designed for. Unfortunately, it is open for M7s or those that are returning, but we got a good pool of people in there to answer questions.
Cool. Okay. Anybody got any questions for John or for Andy or any other points just before we wrap things up? If not, we will. It is getting on a little bit. We'll probably give it a few more seconds. Thank you, John, again. I think that was a really good session, and like I say, hopefully the guys watching it will have got something out of that, and hopefully go on to succeed with their exams. So thank you. Let's wrap things up there. But thanks a lot, guys, and we'll see you. Oh, the next time we've got Tim Kirby doing a talk for us about VHF. So with January. So that was the last one for this year. So thank you all very much.
And Merry Christmas to you all.
Cheers, guys.
Cheerio. Bye.
Cheerio.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for coming in.
Cheers, John.
Bye now.